I drug people for a living. My name's Bill, and I work for a pharmaceutical company as part of their drug testing process. The team consists of Jack and me. We mainly operate on college campuses, an easy source of students willing to participate for a gift card or some quick cash. Getting them in is almost trivial. We just tell them it's a survey, and they don't give it a second thought. Given the vast numbers of students that come through, it's hard to trace the occasional accident back to us. It does start with surveys. We run them through a series of questions until we find someone in the right demographic with the right profile. Some surveys are irrelevant, fillers to avoid suspicion. Others gather psychological insights, basic health metrics, disease history, that sort of thing. We usually find a match within a week. Once we do, we administer the actual test. We tell them they can win an extra $100 if they watch an informational video. They always stick around. About halfway through, we casually offer them snacks and water. Whatever they ask for, we slip the drug into it. Easy as that. The hard part comes after, monitoring them. Since this is obviously illegal, we have to be discreet. One of us tails them on campus while the other enters their dorm. We bug whatever devices we can, laptops, phones, tablets, anything that'll give us data. We don't need detailed pharmacological info, just confirmation that the drug doesn't cause severe side effects. If nothing major happens, no fevers, no seizures, we move forward with legal testing. The company could go straight to formal trials, but this informal route is cheaper and lower risk, especially for experimental drugs. No FDA involvement, no PR disasters if something goes wrong. Nothing ties back to the company. Sometimes stuff does go bad. A couple of premature heart attacks, one case of spontaneous seizures, and we even had one guy go into full-on psychosis. Our current case seemed to be going fine, however. A 22-year-old named Trent, pretty average college kid. We gave him the drug a few hours ago and have been monitoring him from our hotel. "How's he doing?" Jack asked. "He seems fine." He's been scratching himself a ton, skin's turned red, but he doesn't seem too bothered or anything. I set up alerts in case he starts Googling symptoms. "I think we can crash now." "All right." Jack killed the lights and we went to bed. I hadn't even fallen asleep when my laptop's alarm blared. Fuck me, I just wanted to sleep. I dragged myself up and checked the screen. Trent's most recent search, pain in shoulder cause. "Hey, Jack," I called. "Is shoulder pain one of the red flags for the shit?" He groaned and rolled out of bed, flipping through the folder of documents we'd been given. It took him a few minutes to skim through everything. "Nah," he muttered. "Joint pain is a green flag. It means the drug is active." He sighed. "Can you turn off that fucking alarm? We have to be up at 6, and I need some damn sleep." I muted the computer and crawled back into bed. I woke up to a screen filled with alert messages. A whole list of flagged responses. Trouble moving arm, pain in lower back, headache for 8 hours, lumps on back, bloating across body. There were a couple dozen more, but I'll spare you the details. I shook Jack awake, and he immediately started checking the folder to assess how concerning these symptoms were. I scrubbed through the footage. Trent hadn't slept at all last night. He'd been tossing and turning, making 4 trips to the bathroom, each lasting nearly 30 minutes. Even with the camera placed outside, I could hear faint vomiting and sobbing. Shit, yeah, the lump stuff is worrisome. Let me call them real quick. Jack dialed the contact listed in the paperwork and relayed what we'd noticed. The voice on the other end gave a long response that I couldn't quite make out. Jack's expression darkened. He tried to argue back, but the line went dead. Sighing, he put his phone away. "All right," he said, "we gotta check up on the kid. How are we gonna get him back in the survey room? I doubt he's thinking about easy cash in his condition. I'll figure something out. Get in the car and keep an eye on him. I'll drive." Jack moved fast, clearly nervous. He packed up within minutes and barked at me to hurry. No time for breakfast, we were already speeding toward campus. "Hey, how bad is this case?" I asked cautiously. "We've just been ordered to pick him up for now." He exhaled sharply, tightening his already white-knuckle grip on the steering wheel. "But I'm expecting to carry out disposal protocol." I nodded and checked Trent's activity log. His last searches were about local hospitals. "Trent's trying to get to a hospital," I said. "Good, we'll intercept him." A few minutes later, we arrived outside his dorm. Trent stood by the curb, looking exhausted. He approached our car and knocked on the window. Jack rolled it down. "For Trent?" he asked. Yeah," Trent replied. "Why is there someone else in the car?" "I'm collecting driving data for our autopilot initiative," I said, holding up my laptop. "The app should, given you a prompt and a discount for that." "Oh," too tired to think, he got in. Jack nodded at me and we sped off. I opened the glove compartment and retrieved one of the chloroform masks. "Trent, you seem sick. For driver safety, would you mind putting on a mask?" "Sure, whatever," he muttered, leaning forward to take it. He put it on himself and leaned back, oblivious. Within minutes, he was out cold. "Where are we going?" I asked. "There's a facility 25 miles from the city. It used to be company property, empty now. Boss says it should be good enough for us to use." I nodded and pulled out the folder, reading up on the drug. It was a cutting-edge stem cell treatment, supposedly capable of triggering cellular division while reversing differentiation. Theoretically, the body could generate any new tissue needed: brain cells, liver cells, lung cells, a miracle cure. The biggest concern: continuous, unregulated cell division. Cancer. I glanced at Trent. His throat looked inflamed, red and angry. His watch dug into his swollen wrist. His clothes were drenched in sweat. As I reached to examine him further, the car came to a stop. "All right, let's carry him in," Jack said. "No worries about witnesses. Cameras are already offline." We hauled Trent into the abandoned office building. Most furniture remained, but it lacked power. No need for a key, just an open door. The conference room had a bed and a rack of medical equipment. We strapped Trent down while Jack made a few calls to update our handlers. I sat in silence, mentally preparing. The kid had seen him. When he woke up, he'd be in a very sketchy medical facility, restrained. If we let him go, there'd be an investigation. Lawsuits. It could lead back to the company. That meant disposal. I'd done it before. Jack usually handled the actual execution, but I assisted with cleanup. "Time to get started," Jack said. I injected Trent with anesthesia. Jack stripped him down to his underwear. We began the examination. The lumps on his back looked like his spine had pressed up against his skin. Weight loss symptoms. His muscles were stiff, joints inflamed. In fact, his entire body looked kind of inflamed, like it was more full than it should been. We documented everything, took blood and tissue samples. Then I noticed something unusual. Between Trent's left index and middle fingers, a small fingernail had begun to grow. It jutted from the flesh, sharp enough to prick me. Jack made a quick call. "Listen, they want to keep the kid under observation for a while longer. Just monitor him for now, disposal later." I nodded. Not our decision to make. We finished the examination. His bones had developed small spurs, unusual for his age, but not unprecedented. The extra fingernail, though, that was new. With nothing else to do, we passed the time on our phones. When night came, we unrolled sleeping bags and went to bed. I woke in the suffocating dark, my breath sharp against the wheezing gasps filling the room. Trent was convulsing, his body racked with tremors, his mouth twisting around half-formed words. "My head," he rasped, voice raw. "My fucking head." Jack moved faster than I could think. The syringe pierced flesh, the plunger depressed, and Trent's body slackened almost instantly. "He shouldn't have woken up for another 6 hours," I murmured, staring at the still form on the table. Jack's face was unreadable in the dim glow of the overhead light. "Double the dose next time. Metabolic changes are expected with this drug. New cells eat a lot, apparently." Sleep was out of the question. We turned on the lights and peeled back the blanket covering Trent. The sight beneath it made my stomach twist. His fingernails had grown into thick, curving half-fingers, a grotesque duplication of his own hand. The bony protrusions we had dismissed as spurs had become jagged ridges, almost doubling the thickness of his limbs. He had stretched, his body distended like overfilled flesh. His heels bulged outward, splitting the skin, revealing jutting, misshapen bone. "Hey, your skull isn't supposed to do this, right?" Jack's voice was tight. I turned to see his finger pressed against a swollen lump at the side of Trent's skull. I reached out, hesitated, then touched. It gave beneath my fingers, soft, pliable where bone should have been firm. The fissures had stretched, split. There was nothing beneath it, just skin, just emptiness. I leaned in close. His mouth gaped open like something unfinished. his teeth now packed in multiple crowded rows, some jutting out, others sinking into receded gums. His eyes, 2 pupils. Each eye was split down the center, bulging, straining against their sockets. Jack reached out, tilting one with careful fingers. It popped out, rolling down Trent's cheek, optic nerve trailing. We couldn't get it back in. We reduced him with anesthetic. It felt cruel not to. Neither of us spoke. We'd seen side effects before, but this was different. We needed air, distance. We left, finding sanctuary in the fluorescent hum of a McDonald's, lingering long after the food was gone, neither of us eager to return. But we had to. The stench hit first, thick and sickly sweet, cloying like rotting fruit left in the sun. The sounds came next, garbled, inhuman gurgles. Trent's body writhed, his mouth forced open by too many tongues. I jammed the needle into his arm, praying the anesthesia would be enough. And then we saw him. His spine had elongated, unnatural twin columns of bone protruding from his back, pressing against his thinning skin until it split, vertebrae glistening in the harsh light. His limbs had, his forearms sprouting an extra bone, his legs splitting into grotesque second feet. The eye that had fallen out had ballooned to the size of a baseball, while the other had deflated, a crumpled sack hanging in its socket. Feeling along his swollen, misshapen face, I found it, an extra jawbone tucked under his first. "We have to stop this," I whispered, stepping back. I can't stay here." Jack was already dialing. His voice was flat, detached. The call was short. "Disposal, tonight, we'll bury him behind the office. Company will retrieve him later." I spent the rest of the day in the car, unable to shake the image of him, of what he was becoming. Jack sat beside me in silence. We waited, watched the sun sink, swallowed by darkness. Finally, we moved. The stench outside the office was unbearable. Jack checked his gun, met my gaze, and entered. I waited, listened. No gunshot. No sound. Jack returned a minute later, face pale. I don't know," he said, voice hollow. "You need to see this." I followed him in, and then I stopped breathing. Trent was no longer whole. His body was a collapsed husk, ribs broken and splayed open like the remnants of a crushed insect. His face, missing. His skull had split, brain matter smeared against the bed in dripping, rotting patches. His extra limbs, those grotesque new appendages, had been severed, scattered like discarded meat. "Fuck me," I whispered. "Do we just bury what's left of him?" Jack didn't respond. He was staring at the floor, at the streak of blood leading away from the mess, toward the open window, flesh crusted against the handle. "That's not the issue," he finally said. His voice was quiet. "I think a part of it escaped." We ran to the car. Jack called the higher-ups. They hung up. He tried again, no answer. I was panicking, but Jack was silent. He stared through the windshield, unmoving. Just lifted his hand, pointing toward the rear view mirror. Figures, half-formed, illuminated in the single flickering streetlight. Some were missing limbs, others had too many. Trent's, they were watching us, waiting.